You're very welcome back. Now, we're all seeing the resurgence of bicycles and cycling all over the country, of course, the roads, and loads of greenways as well. It's becoming really popular.
Certainly is more. We all had a bike growing up, and they've been around for a very, very long time. Here to tell us all, we have our favourite folklorist, Shane Lehane. Shane, talk fault your road.
Come on, Hi Nelly. Are you a mammal?
Not quite a mammal.
What's a mammal?
The mammal are the middle-aged men in lycra. I'm afraid I'm not.
Rory Cobb is one of them. Who works with us.
Yeah, we'll put a picture up on our Facebook page later just to illustrate what we mean.
Fantastic. But you know, I love my bicycle. I think bicycles are great. And I think the bicycle is the one thing that has revolutionised Irish society. You mightn't think it, everyone thinks of computers, they think of different things through the years. The bicycle was everything to me. I started doing some research on the bicycle. I found they're not that old at all. They kind of go back to the late 18th century, early 19th century, when you had what they called the velocipede. The velocipede was in France, okay, along the Champs-Élysées, the dandy horse, okay, as it was called. And you had fellas going along, a bit like two cartwheels with a bit of wood, and instead of pedals or anything like that, they used to push themselves along.
Yeah, they push bikes the kids have.
Exactly, the balance bikes. But these grew such a speed, they grew and everyone got delighted with them, okay? So the next kind of thing that happens, of course, is that you want to try and get pedals onto it. And that developed then what they call the penny farthing.
We're familiar with
the penny farthings, yeah.
It's a weird looking yoke, really.
What did they even balance on that?
Do you know what was interesting about it, Maura, was that this kind of took over from the horse. They called the bicycle the horse that eats no hay. Right? That was all this. And you needed on the penny farthing to be about the same height as when you were on a horse.
And was that the idea?
That was one of the ideas. But when Irish people saw people on penny farthings and on bicycles for the first time, there were fellas blessing themselves, the children were brought in. There was a woman went along one time in Tralee and she saw the devil on wires. The wires, of course, with the spokes of the bike. I saw the devil on wires. You know, there was a girl up in Galway, she was known as the Flying Girl. She was one of the ascendancy who had the bike.
But it must have been amazing for them to see it, though, because they'd have never seen anything like this ever.
You're absolutely right, and especially when
only the rich, as you said, probably had.
Well, the elite had it in the beginning. It was quite, and later on, of course, when they become popular, everyone had them. But in the beginning, the Flying Girl was one. You know, one was as well when they had the lights on the bicycles long ago. People would see this light flying along the road, and of course there were no lights anywhere, and to see it moving at such speed. That was Jackie the Lantern or Willow the Wisp and all of those.
I remember that story, Willow the Wisp.
Yeah, you know, they were absolutely there. But fellas were making bicycles. There was in Ireland, there were plenty of films of wooden bicycles that blacksmiths were making, harness makers were making. In fact, the whole trade of bicycles came from the horse, and you must remember that. I often think of the Brooks saddle, the beautiful leather saddles that you found. They were a famous company over in England. Okay,
it's something like you have on the bike that came in and there.
But even if you look at the mongery on that, the ironmongery, the springs are there, the whole thing, and then the leatherwork, the harness makers.
It's almost like a saddle, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's emulating a saddle.
But that's what it is. So the bicycle
horse, like a horse saddle,
from that. But you know, what happened is eventually after the penny farthing, you had then what we call the safety bicycle. The safety bicycle was the ordinary bike that we have. The sprocket, the chain was developed, the brakes were developed, and so on. And you're talking about 1880s.
But the sheer weight of those bikes.
Sheer weight and no tyres, Dahi. So
they were called no tyres.
They were called the bone shakers.
So they were just going on like metal.
Going on bits of rubber, and it was Dunlop, who actually from Scotland, who was in the major change in the bicycle was the development of the inflatable tyre. And that was
I think that was sore behind now, it's
it was invented in Ireland, which I think is amazing.
Really?
Invented in Belfast, yeah. So he was from Scotland, Dunlop, but he was a vet in Belfast, and the whole manufacture of bicycles took off from about 1888 onwards. Okay. They were still heavy.
Can we ask you just about the bike you came in on? Like, Di and I were just kind of saying, like, my dad, this was like our car, right? Well, seriously, the Hi Nelly, as we'd call it, or was that like a rally, or what was that?
Okay, so in fact we have a really interesting one. In Ireland, a lot of the bikes were being made in Birmingham, they were being made in England, tubular steel now at this point, a little bit lighter and so on. But what happens is we have our own Irish manufacturing as well. The Pierce foundry down in Wexford, they were famous, okay? You had the Lehane factory in Dublin and so on. But the Pierce foundry, for example, they were making, wheelbarrows, they were making plough parts, they were making all the agricultural stuff. they made their own bikes as well. And there's a very interesting photograph of Michael Collins, who I'm sure you're familiar with. Collins was a great man for the bicycle.
He was, yeah. I remember that very famous photo.
And in fact, I said the bicycle was a major part of our social history. I reckon we wouldn't have any independence without the bicycle, because the flying columns were in bicycles, dispatches were going on, Collins was going all around the place, he was cycling all over Dublin. But that bicycle, there's a bit of controversy. Some say it's an English bicycle, the Rudge bicycle with the double handlebars, or double crossbar that you can see there, whereas others would say it was a Pierce bicycle because it was more nationalistic.
Of course.
Now, I'm not going to get into that argument in any shape or form, but people will associate themselves with the English or the Irish bicycle.
Is there a point in history, Shane, where, say, loads of people had bikes?
Yeah.
What time are we
So
talking
about? Like once the inflatable tyre came in, the early 1900s, you could really talk about the war era where manufacturing of these sort of things became commonplace.
The First World War.
First World War. So post First World War, everybody had a bicycle. And you know what? I often think about it opened up the social life. People went to dances.
In the country, you're right. They could cycle for miles. It would take you hours to walk.
But you could also cycle to work, I suppose, Shane. Because I talking about, say, the 50s, going from our own parish into Dingle, let's just cycle in and out of Dingle every day.
Oh, listen,
but if you drive it in 10 minutes, but it's probably an hour and a bit. Like.
People cycled incredible distances. Like I was talking to a man the other day, Timmy R, my neighbour outside, he was saying his father went to a Munster final in Thurles, a round trip of 150 miles, he didn't take anything, and he went to a dance afterwards, because the girlfriend had gone out to Lehane. That was another 20 miles, but because nobody thought about that. I think bicycles are also responsible for the liberation of women, and I think this is a really important point to make, because up to now you were confined to your parish, to your town and to your area. Now you could cycle off to a dance, you could go out. The bloomers, the famous bloomers, the underwear that were worn, they were developed specifically for women to be cycling on their bikes. Because if you think of them corseted and bustled and so on, all of a sudden women were going out and they were able to, let's say, go to a hop or go to a crossroads dance somewhere, all of that. The bicycle opened up everything. And I often think, and this is a really important point, I often think of the crossbar, If sometimes, you might have accompanied the girl home, but if she didn't have a bicycle, you might coax her onto your crossbar. That was almost like a sort of a trial for the future.
We all did that probably back in the day.
If you got a girl up in the crossbar, that was a good thing to start off with. But there was a whole kind of test going on, could you, because usually you were in a great position, you with your head up by her ear, and you could be whispering things you had, and you could be doing, as you went, your hands around it was very intimate and so on. But of course you couldn't see where you were going, which was half the problem. You see, and you had to pretend you were very competent, and make sure that you get past any obstacles.
To cycle the bike as well.
Yeah, and when I think about it, it's so sort of almost like a trial for the future relationship. If you got
I think the Heinelli was better though for the crossbar, because you could kind of, you had them captured, but you also had it in, so it would be a bit more stability.
You weren't getting over the penny farthing though.
No, it was a different test. But travelling to the dances at night meant that you had to have a light on your bike, and going back through time, the light was all important, and they didn't have batteries. They didn't have dynamos way back. The old lights, and I got this again from a great neighbour of mine, Padjo Looney. I put the word out, and Padjo arrives down with the carbide lamp. The carbide lamp will be a mystery to a lot of people. So let me show you very quickly how it worked. At the bottom part here, there's a little chamber, and into this was placed a powder, calcium carbide, It was a dry powder. That was fine. You put that onto the bottom here then, and you reattached it. Up on the top here then, there was a little area, and into this you put water, So just simply water. The reaction between the water and the calcium carbide powder left off an acetylene gas. And in the front here then, that little gas, you would light this little portion of it here, and it was a beautiful...
Was there a wick?
No wick, no, just pure gas, Absolutely wonderful. And you close it up here.
It was inside the chamber.
And that was it. And you could adjust the amount of water going down, creating the amount of gas from the little top portion here.
How long would it last?
It would last long enough, usually until the water ran out. And this was one of the funny things then. What happened is you usually had plenty of powder without any water, so you'd open up the back, and of course you'd have to use the natural reservoirs. You'd have to use your own you'd have to do the business in there, and that would keep your light going in your bike.
What year are we talking about there before you go?
Listen, these go up to the 1940s, 1950s. Yes, they were still in.
After the war, Gurmila Shane, great to have you back on us. Minding information as always.
Now with nearly 2 billion Spotify